Hello, I am Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 here to recap baseball from week 14. We got 1 weekend to go in SEC baseball. This, like most, a very interesting one. We're going to get into all 7 series played this week, and I'm going to give them to you in this order. Arkansas, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Georgia at South Carolina, Alabama, LSU, Kentucky at Florida, and Auburn, Missouri to wrap it up. Before we go there, a reminder, BetOnline is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, the NBA, and NHL playoffs, all the latest stats, news, and scores. Available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We will start in Fayetteville, where Arkansas takes 2 of 3 at home from a pretty hot Mississippi State club. This, as I thought, was a pretty even series. Arkansas wins it 2-1, but a composite score of 21-19. And the difference in the series, I think, was timely execution on offense. Mississippi State left 37 guys on base. Arkansas left 16 on. Arkansas starting pitching was mostly a disappointment. It combined for 7 2/3 innings, I think, all weekend, but the bullpen was mostly great. Of course, the best starter of the bunch for Arkansas, you can guess who. It was Hagen Smith, but not a vintage Hagen Smith outing from him this weekend. As for Mississippi State, the bullpen really struggled. That has been a strong point for State in its recent surge, but Carson Ligon, Gavin Black, Cam Schulke, Tyson Harden, all combined to have their struggles in this series. 11 home runs in this series total. I don't know that I expected that. And here's another thing I didn't expect, and I feel like we've been saying this a lot lately. Hudson White, Arkansas's catcher, has really come on. He was 5 for 12 in this series with 6 RBIs, 2 home runs. Arkansas is now up 2 games in the West, 1 behind Kentucky for the overall lead. Of course, the Razorbacks can control their destiny next week in the West against Texas A&M. Mississippi State is 15-12. RPI is up to 16. So the Bulldogs squarely in the hosting mix at this point. We'll see how next weekend turns out. All right, in Nashville, Tennessee takes 2 of 3 at Vanderbilt in another competitive series. Composite score in this one, Tennessee 15, Vanderbilt 13. The difference in this series, a couple of big innings by Tennessee, late or to middle late in the game. In the Friday game, Tennessee got to Vandy's bullpen with a 5-run eighth. Home runs by Kavaris Tears, Cannon Peoples, plus 1 stellar home run by Christian Moore earlier in the game. He added another one on Saturday in a 4-run 6th inning. Those 2 big innings were really the difference in the series for both teams. And other difference in this one, Aaron Combs, Nate Snead, Kirby Connell went 5 innings and gave up 1 earned run in one of those games. That was a key thing for the Vols. We're just holding Vanderbilt down late. And Snead actually went again on Sunday and left the game mid-count. So I don't know if there was an injury there or something, but might keep an eye on that one. As for Vandy, Commodores get the win on Sunday. J.D. Thompson, Devin Futrell combined on a 3-hit shutout. Alan Espinal, a 2-run home run. The Vols are in decent shape at this point for whatever they want, whether that is a overall title. They are 17-7, trailing Kentucky. So Tennessee in the uncomfortable position of having to root for Vanderbilt next weekend, which goes to Kentucky. And Vandy really needs to get at least 1 from the Wildcats. Maybe 2. 2, I think, gets Vanderbilt in next weekend, and we'll talk more about this next. But Vanderbilt has now won 12 games in the league, and frankly looked better this weekend than it has in a couple of these disastrous weekends. So I think both teams can find something to be happy about coming out of the series. Tennessee gets the win, and Vanderbilt competes pretty well with the number 1 team and finds some pitching in spots, which has been a little bit of an issue for them as well as just about anybody else lately. All right, the shocker of the weekend, Ole Miss hosting Texas A&M. It takes 2 of 3 from the Aggies, outscores the Aggies 14-11 for the series. That last one got a little lopsided in A&M's favor. We'll get to that one in just a moment. But in the opener, Riley Maddox, Wes Mendez, and Connor Spencer combined to outduel Ryan Prager, who's one of the best 4 or 5 pitchers in this league. Evan Aschenbeck also maybe in that discussion too, at least along the reliever discussion he is for sure. Ole Miss gets a 4-3 win in that opener. I don't think people expected this to be a low-scoring series, but it was. Saturday, Liam Doyle threw really well for the Rebels. 6 innings pitched, 1 earned run. He's been their best starter. The outings have been a little bit limited in length at times, but he's been very effective when he's been in there. Josh Mallitz, who was the guy who sat out last year for the Rebels, he came back to give Ole Miss 3 innings, 1 run in relief. As for A&M, you're starting to see some pitching faltering in some spots. And Justin Lampkin, one of those guys, Aggies really having trouble out of the 2 or 3 holes in their rotation recently, although that may change based on something I'm going to get to in just a minute. But Chris Cortez, one of their better bullpen arms, an inning and 2/3, 4 runs in that one. So the bullpen and the rotation not getting it done. Balanced offense for Ole Miss in that one. Nobody really stood out. But anyway, the Rebels get enough offense from enough guys and good pitching from Doyle and Mallitz to get that one. Go to game 3, where A&M needed to win to salvage the series, and boy, did Shane Sadeo come up big. He was a guy that's been used out of the bullpen in bulk inning outings. They move him to that number 3 and get the feeling that's going to stick after this weekend. He gives Jim Schlossnagle 7 innings pitched, no earned runs in the finale. Caden Sorrell, one of the better young outfielders in the league, he hit a home run. But takeaways from this after the weekend, Ole Miss is now 11-16 with a 24 RPI. I think this is a team that has gotten itself into the regional conversation. That series next weekend with LSU is going to be super interesting, especially if there's a split in there between games. If one team gets a sweep, that team can probably feel okay about getting to the NCAAs, especially if that's Ole Miss. But you get a 2-1 outcome somewhere or some rainouts, and God help you as you figure that out. Again, we'll get to that later in the week. As for A&M, the Aggies, boy, they were in a great position 2 weekends ago. Now they're going to have to sweep Arkansas this weekend to win the West. They are certainly capable of doing that. It's capable of sweeping just about anybody, although with Arkansas, that pitching staff, good luck to you. I would have to bet against that outcome. So A&M has got its work cut out for it, but at least it controls its destiny in the West this coming weekend. All right, here's where it gets a little bit uglier. Georgia gets a sweep at South Carolina. Georgia is the hottest hitting club in the league right now. 39-22 was the composite score series here. Georgia's now won 8 in a row. It got 10 runs in the final 2 innings of one of those games, including a Logan Jordan pinch hit grand slam. Just bombs away for Georgia in this one. Trey Phelps got 4 home runs. Slade Alford had 2. Corey Collins had 2. And Charlie Condon, Fernando Gonzalez, Logan Jordan. Jordan, of course, had the aforementioned pinch hit grand slam. All had a home run for the Bulldogs, who just can't be contained at this point, it seems. Leighton Finley goes 5 solid innings for Georgia. That's a couple of weekends in a row. He's given them a good outing. South Carolina, boy, it was a bleak weekend. 11 different pitchers by my count allowed runs. As for Georgia, number 5 in the RPI, they are certainly firmly in the national seed conversation. I still think South Carolina is safe for the NCAAs, but I think the hosting took a big hit this weekend. Carolina is going to need to do some work at 13-14, but it will get a chance against Tennessee and Knoxville, so we'll see how that goes. All right. Alabama. This was, I thought, maybe the most interesting series of the weekend. Certainly, maybe not the most interesting, but on that list of 2 or 3. And I was really interested in this because I thought LSU matched up pretty well with Alabama, but it was in Tuscaloosa. It was just what I thought. It was a close series. LSU outscores Alabama 16-15, but it lost the series with a pair of 1-run wins by the Crimson Tide. I think the big thing in this weekend I was watching, Alabama's pitching with Greg Ferrone in particular, although he's faltered a little bit of late, I wanted to see what happened with Ben Hess. He is probably their most talented arm, or was considered that coming into the season, but really had not pitched like I think people expected Ben Hess to pitch.
He goes 6 2/3 innings, gives up 1 earned run in the deciding game. Alabama hit 4 home runs, or I think the teams combined hit 2 home runs because I think White and Jones had one from LSU, now that I think about it. But you saw 4 home runs in that Friday night game, no home runs the other 2 games, if I read a box score correctly, between those 2 teams. And really not much stood out in this series. It wasn't one of these outside of Ben Hess where just somebody just popped up in the box score. So I think Alabama's bullpen was a little bit better this weekend. That has been something that I've kind of been wanting to see from the Crimson Tide. Again, the starters at times have been pretty good, but Alton Davis, Tyler Fay, some of those guys had not given Alabama what maybe it needed. Braylon Myers, another guy. Those guys pitched much better this weekend. So I think for Alabama, that's one big takeaway for the weekend series. Also, the fact that Alabama, I think, is 11 in the RPI after this. So a spot where the Crimson Tide, I don't know that hosting is going to be in the conversation with where the record is. But at this point, the good news is the RPI is firmly there. If Alabama can just get to 13 wins, probably in the league, then, and it's at 12 right now, then I think Alabama's got a good shot to be in a regional based on their RPI. Again, we'll get to some of that later in the week as we break down tournament scenarios and all those things. But that was one takeaway I had for Alabama. Well, 2 of them, the RPI in great shape and the bullpen pitched in spots better than it has. And those are things that Alabama definitely needed coming out of the week. And as for LSU, I continue to think this is a better club than the record, but the record is what gets you judged, and that's becoming a little bit of a problem for Jim Johnson and the Tigers. All right, Kentucky and Florida. Interesting series because Florida outscores Kentucky 26-19 in its own ballpark, but it loses the series because Kentucky got, what was it, a 2-run win and a 1-run win. And let me just go through these. I'll start with the most decisive one. That's Florida winning 10-1. Liam Peterson, who's been really good for them at times, very talented kid. He goes 6 innings, gives up 1 run, strikes out 6. Ryan Slater out of the pen, gives him 3 innings of scoreless relief. In fact, shut down the side in order all 3 innings. Kentucky's pitching, Dominic Neiman struggled in that one. As for Florida, home runs from Curlin, Heyman hit a couple. Jack Caglione walked 4 times in that game. You can see Kentucky was probably going to pitch around him, which is not a bad choice. So that's the one that Florida won going away. And then we get to the other 2, which were more interesting. Kentucky gets a 12-11 win over Florida on Friday. Lot of offense in this one. A lot of crooked numbers and innings. Kentucky outhits Florida 12-11 in this one. And I guess what stands out is the bullpen for Kentucky. Hogan, Nove, Hagenau pitched pretty well. The other guys were spotty. But sometimes in one of these shootouts like you saw in that one, you just need some guys to come in and give you some outs. Johnny Hummel, their closer, kind of faltered again in that one. And a lot of home runs in this one. Ryan Nicholson, Kentucky's best offensive player, hit 2 home runs in this one. Caglione got 1. Shelton got 2, and Donay got 1 for Florida. So what happened in this one, Kentucky gets 3 in the 9th to take the lead and hold on in the bottom of the inning. And so that was the first win for Kentucky in the opener. The other game was a 7-5 Kentucky win. Mason Moore pitched more like Mason Moore has pitched earlier in the year. We've talked about how he's been a little bit down lately, as has that whole Kentucky rotation. But for Nick Mingione, it was good to see him pitch a better game. Again, the bullpen, Nove, Hummel, although Hummel gave up 1 runner or 1 strikeout, 1 walk, and did not record an out. So maybe an area of concern for Kentucky was that Johnny Hummel continues to struggle. But you got bits and pieces. I've said about this Kentucky staff time and time again. You've got 12, 13, maybe 14 guys that can throw on a weekend. Ben Cleaver, in this case, the guy that gave them the final out of the weekend. I don't even know if Ben Cleaver was on the roster before now in terms of the weekend roster, but he got the final out in that one. For Florida, Jack Caglione threw really well. 6 innings, 1 earned run. Again, the offense, Tyler Shelnut, who seems to get power and burst, gave them a home run. But Kentucky on the weekend, on that game, out hits Florida 7-5. and ends up getting a win just thanks to a bunch of different guys, whether it's bullpen guys in the lineup. Only 2 guys with more than 1 hit in this one. Nick Lopez, who's been super consistent at that DH spot, and Patrick Herrera, who got 2 hits and 4 RBIs. But same story with Kentucky. You win that one as a team, and the Cats went to Florida. And in spite of not playing their best baseball, that they got timely hitting and pitching, and that's how they took 2 out of 3, despite being outscored in this series. All right, the last one, and this one really didn't have a lot hinging on it unless Missouri could maybe sweep the series and get into place, put itself in a spot to get to Hoover. That's not what happened. Auburn took 2 or 3 from Missouri this weekend. Auburn's got a pretty good lineup when it's healthy, and that's been an issue for Bush Thompson at times, but the Tigers outscored Missouri 32-21 this weekend. Missouri got 2 scoreless innings from Bryce Mayer in its win. He's been really good for them at times. Auburn, pitching has been an issue, but it got 8 innings from Chase Alsop and Carson Myers, allowing 2 runs in one of those games, 4 home runs in that one, including the 14th from Mike Irish, who is maybe the best hitting catcher in the league. And then in the other games, Christian Herberholtz went 5 scoreless. Cade Ballou and Chris Stanfield both hit home runs this weekend in multiple games. So Auburn, season going nowhere. I think Auburn mathematically eliminated from Hoover, but you want to end the season on a good note. I've maintained many times Auburn, not so much a bad team as much as a team that's getting bad outcomes, but some good outcomes for Butch Thompson this weekend in taking 2 games against a Missouri team that, as we know, not an easy out. All right, we'll be back with more baseball coverage. We'll have power rankings. We'll have recaps next weekend. We may have a little bit of stuff looking ahead to Hoover. We're going to have all SEC teams coming up after all the games are played on Saturday. We got all kinds of stuff. Best way to get our baseball content, hit the subscribe button. And if you hit the like button, that helps us out too, helps us get noticed. All right, I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. Thank you for watching our content, which again is presented by BetOnline.